Hello, this is Jennifer Grady from the Grady Firm. We are an immigration law firm in Southern California, and we help create and protect the American dream for immigration applicants based on employment, investment, and family relationships. And I'm here today with Anthony Mance, our lead immigration attorney, and we're going to talk about something that's very important and one of the biggest changes to U.S. immigration in a long, long time. And this affects over the 1 million students that are here in the United States that are foreign students in undergraduate and graduate programs. And so this has been a very big topic that a lot of people are trying to navigate, especially due to the short timeline, because ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, has now modified the requirements for the fall 2020 semester. And in April, schools were told that if students were taking classes online, they would still be able to remain here, but that is now changed, and schools have until July 15th, 2020 to figure out whether they're doing classes either online or a hybrid model. And so a lot of schools are scrambling to figure this out. We do have lawsuits that have been filed, so this is very much in flux, but we wanted to reach out to clients and other students in the United States who may be concerned and scared and anxious about what to do. And so we're here today to clarify this, tell you a little bit about what's going on, and maybe give you some pointers and advice. So a summary of these new exemptions are that if students are attending schools that are operating entirely online, they cannot take a full online course load and remain in the United States. And the U.S. Department of State would not issue visa to students that are fully online for the fall semester, and they will not be able to enter the United States. So the most important thing to note is that if active students are currently enrolled in these online-only programs, they must depart the country or take other measures, such as transferring to a school with in-person instruction, to remain in lawful status, or potentially face immigration consequences, including but not limited to the initiation of removal proceedings. So this is one of the first times where we are in a situation that people are lawfully in the United States and they're told that they may have to exit on an emergency basis. And of course, this can be even more tricky considering travel restrictions. Ultimately, you would have to leave the United States, and it would not matter to the government where you're going, but you have to keep in mind that you may not be able to get a direct flight home to your country or to travel up through other countries. For example, Canada is not accepting travelers, so you would have to find an open country to get through on your way home. So Anthony, tell us a little bit more about what this would look like for students who are at a school that's decided for health and safety measures that classes will be entirely online in the fall. What would this person have to do in order to either stay here or get home safely?
Well, I would say the first thing that the student wants to do is they want to communicate with their designated school official that's dealing with immigration. And they should keep in mind that these officials right now are getting inundated with calls and emails with similarly concerned students. So the best thing to do is to look on the school's website first to see if there's any information, and then, potentially send an email, but, to keep in mind that it may take a while before they get a response back. But obviously, if the school has made the determination at this point to go completely online, they will have to take measures, and those measures are either going to be to switch to a new program that offers either full in-person classes or a hybrid model that's been approved by ICE, or take measures to depart the United States. So what I would advise is if a student knows their school is going to go completely online, they should start looking for other programs that might be available. So their current designated officer at their current school will likely not have the information about other programs. So it really will be up to them to find a different program. So that would be what they should do first. And then at the same time, they probably should contact their local consulate or embassy for their home country to just find out about the possibility of flights out of the United States to their home country, because that may be something that they do have to take into consideration. Even if they're not at the point where they're going to leave immediately, they really do want to have that planned, because as you said, there are a lot of countries right now where travel is restricted, so they want to have a plan in place for that.
Exactly. So I was on a webinar earlier today with administrators of international student programs around the country, and they've said they're receiving hundreds of emails a day. So while we would not discourage you from contacting your school in the event that they're not getting back to you just to the sheer volume, part of it is holding tight, because the deadline right now is July 15th next week. We do have a hearing. There is a lawsuit filed by Harvard and MIT against ICE and Department of Homeland Security that has a hearing on Tuesday. So that's going to be a big day. Check back with us on Tuesday the 14th. But until then, you also need to take care of yourself and have a plan A, a plan B, possibly even a plan C that you can figure out. If I can stay, fantastic. If I can transfer, is that something you want to look at this week? And then also looking into alternative travel plans so that you can figure out how to exit the country. Normally there is a 60-day grace period, but we're not sure if that would be applicable, because again, this is unprecedented and the first time this type of situation has occurred. The second category is for students attending schools that are operating under normal in-person classes, and they're bound by the existing federal regulations, and they may only take up to one class or 3 credit units online for the fall. So you would again want to contact your school to get an updated I-20 for next year. And then the more interesting and perhaps confusing model is the quote hybrid model, and that is a mixture of online and in-person classes. And you would be allowed to take more than one class or 3 credit hours online, but the school must certify to SEVP, and that is the Student and Exchange Visitor Program, through the Form I-120, which is the Certificate of Eligibility for Non-Immigrant Status, that the program is not entirely online and the student is not taking an entirely online course load for the fall 2020 semester. That is to show that you're actually here and you have a purpose to be here present in the US. Otherwise, you could hypothetically take online classes from anywhere in the world. And you'd have to show that you're still taking the minimum number of classes to make progress in your degree program. So Anthony, anything else for the students in the hybrid? We've heard lots of different things, professors volunteering to teach students or do online office hours and things like that, but we don't know if that's going to qualify for this I-120. Any thoughts on this?
Yes, as you mentioned earlier when you were discussing issues with the 60-day grace period and the uncertainty as to whether that'll apply. One issue right now, this new directive came out, and the day after it came out, so on the 7th, July 7th, ICE issued a Q&A where they answered some of the questions, and some of their responses, it was in direct contradiction to the initial rules. So there's a lot of uncertainty that's created by the fact that, frankly, the government has just not been clear on what is going to be permitted and what's not going to be permitted. And, there's been a lot of talk in the news about schools coming up with creative ways to having in-person one-on-one classes or having graduate students teach classes. And I think people, while that's definitely admirable and it may be something that is a creative solution, people need to be cautious that at the end of the day, the schools can't do any of this unless ICE approves it. So if a school is going to implement a hybrid program or is going to have any other kind of creative workaround, so to speak, the student needs to make sure that it's approved by ICE, because, just because a school decides to do it, if ICE has not approved it and the student takes part in that program, they may be unwittingly being out of status and incurring unlawful presence in the United States. So they need to be very cautious about how they proceed. So bottom line is, if the school is planning on doing any kind of hybrid model, the student needs to communicate with the school to make sure the program has been approved by ICE. And I think a lot of these schools will communicate to their students once they get approval, and the guidelines will be clear. But it's just something to keep in mind that, you know, you want to make sure you're cautious before moving forward with anything.
And how has the threat of withdrawing funding to these universities affected their potential options of staying open or closing and going online?
I think any kind of governmental withdrawal of funding is something that's very complicated and likely not going to be effective in the short term. There are a lot of tax issues and laws that will make such a withholding of funding complicated. I think the bigger issue is if a lot of international students do depart the United States and decide to resume their education elsewhere, a lot of schools are going to lose, you know, significant funding that is necessary. You know, so certain programs may be canceled, certain degrees may be, you know, put on hold. Some researchers, some professors may move to schools outside the U.S. So it could have a very significant long-term effect in terms of U.S. universities being able to effectively, you know, have these types of programs. So I think that's probably the bigger issue in the short term.
And for reference, some schools, international students are a very big part of their population. It's about a third of the students at Carnegie Mellon. Over 10,000 students at Penn State are international. And then if we look at the STEM degrees and graduate programs, 70 to 90% of some of these degree programs, the majority of their students are international. So this will affect who would be able to be a TA. This would affect research. And as we know, part of our I would say motto here at the Grady firm is creating the American dream, and we have received some of our best research scientists and inventors that are immigrants from around the world. So regardless of opinion on immigration, we have to admit that some of our greatest talent have come from abroad, and that is something that we should protect. So right now, there are lawsuits. We have Harvard and MIT that is going to be heard on Tuesday. We've also heard that the University of California and California itself will be bringing lawsuits. We've heard over 50 different schools trying to be involved. So there's definitely going to be a lot going on in the next few days, and this is all on an emergency fast track basis because of the July 15th deadline, because schools hypothetically would be starting in early to mid to late August, and people have to travel and make arrangements. So this is definitely a touch and go, minute by minute type of thing. Anthony, what would happen if somebody does get caught in this situation where they have to depart, and we have, what would happen if they're out of status? Tell us a little bit about that.
That's another issue that at this point has not fully been explained by ICE. Technically, under current immigration law, the moment you are out of status, you do have the risk of being put into removal proceedings, which are official legal court proceedings where a judge determines whether you should be removed from the United States. Normally, that's not something the government does immediately. Normally, you're asked to leave the country, and if you don't leave within a certain period of time, then you are at risk of being barred. So there's a 6-month and a 1-year overstay in the U.S. that has a 5 and a 10-year bar, respectively. In this
and
case,
just I'll clarify on that. So if you're out of status for 6 months up to 12 months, then you can be banned from returning to the U.S. for 3 years. If you're out of status for 12 months or more, which can be common, maybe people came here when they were young, they never were in status, so they've definitely surpassed that 1 year. If they were to leave the country, they couldn't enter again for 10 years. And so we have seen where that does happen, and people have to actually wait it out, and they might have family members and children here, but they can't come back until that happens. So it is something very serious. So we do recommend, if you're concerned or you have questions, you can give us a call. We do a free 15-minute consultation. We also do a 30-minute conversation for a fee, where we would give you legal analysis, answer your questions, provide you the pros and cons of your situation. So we would say over the next few days, listen, check the news, look online. We'll put some links in the comment section of our page. And if you do find this was helpful for you, please like or share the video, and we're here to help you. So you can give us a call at 949-798-6298, or you can book a consultation on our website at gradyfirm.com, or you can email us with your questions at info@gradyfirm.com. Any parting thoughts?
I would just say that, anybody that feels that they may be impacted by this, if you're on a F1 visa or an M1 visa, to just, follow the news, follow what your school's saying. I would say probably follow what your school's saying even more than the news, but it is good to keep watching what's happening. That's where you'll probably find information about, any potential lawsuits or any changes to, larger policy. The other thing to consider too is that, if you're in an F1 program that is based on English language, or if you're in an M1 vocational program, likely you can't have any kind of online classes. You have to be doing all in person. So that's something to make sure you take into account too. But the bottom line is right now, I think there's going to be a lot happening in a very short period of time. Basically, with the upcoming lawsuits, they need a decision by Wednesday, because after that, they've reached the deadline that ICE is giving the schools to determine what kind of policy they're going to have in the fall. So I think the next few days are going to be critical.
Well, we will keep you posted. So thank you, Anthony, for all of your great advice, and we look forward to connecting with all of you on social media or in the comments below. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.